you. Dr. Patrick Muinde is a research manager at Wild Animal Protection, and Dr. Victor Yamo is a farming campaigns manager at the same organization, Wild Animal Protection. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you here. Welcome to the hot seat of the conversation. We'll be talking about wild animal protection. We've had this conversation with your colleagues at Wild Animal Protection before. But for those who missed that conversation, I think it's important that we first start by introducing Wild Animal Protection. Who are you, Dr. Patrick Muinde?
Thank you, Eric, and it's nice to be here. We are World Animal Protection. Basically, we are a global organization, and our mission is animal welfare, to ensure that animals live a life worth living. We work with key stakeholders, that is governments, public and corporate, just to show how important animals are to us.
And by animals, we're talking about all animals.
Yes, by animals, we are talking about all animals, but at the moment in our new strategy, we are focusing more on wild animals and farmed animals because we believe these are animals which are affected in masses, in big numbers, and we are trying to create awareness why it's important to take care of these animals. Because if we don't, basically we are the ones to bear the pain and the impact that will be affecting us.
Dr. Yamo, we want to talk about commodification of animals and going into the case of whether it's sustainable or not.
Yeah.
But let's first of all define commodification. What does that mean?
Thank you, Eric. Commodification is basically where animals are no longer being treated as animals, but as commodities. And we see it happening across the two large areas that we work in. In wildlife, it's basically where we use the wildlife as a commodity. So for instance, if I give you an example, instead of allowing a lion to be a lion, we then want to convert it into something like a pet or a commodity that we then use for our pleasure. So you see things like people shooting them or growing them for specific purposes for entertainment, which is not what the lion was meant for. In terms of farming, you can see what happens. We are putting massive number of animals into small spaces. It is looking like a conveyor belt because essentially what we are doing is passing them through a system which doesn't really care about their sentience. And sentience here is about the animal being able to feel, has feelings, has capacity to understand, has capacity to remember what it has, the experiences it has gone through. And all these things then end up in a situation where you are having issues that come out of it. We have public health implications, we have trade implications, we have implications on even the food that we eat, and the productivity of the animal if you're looking at it from a farming animal perspective. Thank you.
How does this affect the animals' rights?
A very good question,
and
Eric.
Welfare of the animal.
A very good question again. Fundamentally, as an organization, we say animals essentially do not have rights per se, but they have what we call freedoms, which are internationally recognized. And there are 5 freedoms. Freedom number 1 is about freedom from hunger and thirst, which essentially means you need to ensure that the animal not only gets the right food that meets its physiological status or its stage of production. You recognize, Eric, that how you feed a day-old chick is not how you feed a producing hen, for that matter. So that is important. And of course, the most important of those processes is the fact that you need water. If you don't have water, then the food doesn't make sense anywhere. And that then leads to productivity of the animals and other things that we can look at later. The second one is freedom from discomfort, which essentially looks at the house or the structure around which the animal lives in. It should be comfortable. It should have comfortable resting places. You should ensure that the animal has the capacity to express its natural behavior in that space you've given it. If they're overcrowded, like in some production systems, especially intensive ones, then the animal doesn't have space to do what it's supposed to be, and that then has negative impacts on its livelihood, on its life, and ultimately on its productivity. The third one is freedom from pain, injury, and disease, which essentially is to say animals are like you and I. If we're going through painful situations or we are injured, we underperform. And that then exposes us to capacity to have diseases. And diseases, essentially, globally, we are now recognizing that 70% of new and emerging diseases are actually coming from animals. And so it's critical and important that we manage that disease at the animal level and not allow it to spill into human populations, because then it becomes expensive to manage. And the adage, prevention is better than cure, then comes into mind, because then you're looking at it from that level. Then you have freedom to express natural behavior. Animals have their own naturalness and uniqueness. That freedom to express it, even in a production system, that space that you've given that animal should allow it to express its natural behavior. A hen, for instance, patches and scratches and dust bits, allows its wings to flap. All those things are important for the animal because it minimizes stress, but they're also important to productivity. If they're not allowed to happen, then certain things happen in the production system that has impact on productivity of that animal and health or that distress, which essentially is the mental aspects of the welfare of that animal. If anything causes stress or fear, that animal then goes through other physiological processes. You end up in a situation where they release hormones like adrenaline, which then has an impact on the animal's meat, texture, and everything else. So all these things are important to the animal, but they're also important to us. And what is happening now is globally, animal welfare policies are even becoming a prerequisite for trade. If you're going to trade in animals, organizations are beginning to do animal welfare audits to ensure that the animal is catered for in that production system. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Dr. Muinde, so recently, of course, there's some information that has come out in terms of what may be planned for certain animals in the country. What is your stand on the proposals to farm hyenas and snakes as revenue generators?
Thank you so much for that question. To start with, farming is not something new. Farming of wildlife, it has been there before. But the current trend is that industries and governments are moving away from that because of a number of reasons that I'm going to explain to you. But referring to the information that was shared on interest to farm hyenas and snakes. First, we need to understand these are wild animals. They still have wild instincts, and they are worth when they are in the wild, in their natural habitats. And on the same, if you look at the reasoning behind their farming, it does not really make sense. For example, farming hyenas to harvest some of their body parts to be used for medicine. Well, we know that science has not proven how these animal parts are effective in treating diseases. I'm going to use the example of other common known parts. For example, pangolin scales. They have been traded in masses. And again, you have seen lion bones being traded again to supply traditional Chinese medicine. The opinion to farm hyenas to harvest their testicles to be used for traditional medicine, we believe that is, and it's a fact, is exploitation of wildlife, because these parts are not effective in treating. And basically, a lot of science have shown that. And again, mentioning the same and showing how governments have transitioned. For example, South Africa has been breeding lions for quite some time, with up to between 8,000 to 12,000 lions in breeding farms. But at the moment, they are working to phase out that industry. Basically because of animal welfare conditions in which those animals are kept, and again because of zoonotic aspect of it. We did a research that showed zoonotic risk of keeping lions and how people who are taking care of lions are exposed. So basically, as much as we are trying to commodify these wild animals, we are not considering the cost that comes with it. Basically, the benefits are short-term, but the effect and the impacts are long-term. Currently, we are still in COVID-19, and we know 60% of zoonotic diseases, these are diseases that are transmitted from animals to humans, are still prevalent. And looking into the future, there's 75% chance that any new disease, or rather emerging disease, is going to come from wildlife. So it's the time we be cautious and we change how we utilize or interact with these wild animals. Otherwise, the current situation of COVID-19 will keep on repeating. And on the same, all that connects to trade, both legal and illegal, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. For example, the estimate is that that industry is worth 42 billion, both legal and illegal. But again, making it legal does not make it right. Because basically you are creating an opportunity for the illegal trade to get market. And again, you don't factor these externalities which I just mentioned about their impact to our health. So the key is as you consider these things, other countries are facing them out. The current news about milk farms in Europe being closed because of COVID-19 variant affecting them, and the risk of mutation and making vaccines ineffective. So there's quite a lot to think about, not just to wake up, or rather to go the way of commodifying and exploiting wildlife, while generally the globe is changing from that direction.
So,
Thank you.
but wouldn't you then say perhaps that if we're to take a view that Africans and African nations can't benefit from their wildlife, wouldn't that be a little imperialistic?
Basically, if I can go back, history tells us as Africans we have lived in harmony with animals, and basically their utilization. For example, trophy hunting is something that has been introduced to us. It wasn't there before. The only utilization that was there before was bushmeat consumption, was food consumption. But trying to commodify wildlife in terms of earning income from it, it wasn't our previous view of animals, because we understand even currently there are some clans which are associated with wildlife. If you can go to where we are coming from, some clans in Africa are associated with wildlife. You know, my clan, like, it's associated with a certain bird, or it's associated with a certain animal, and it's your key task to ensure that animal is protected in the world. So talking about benefiting from them, yes, you can benefit from them, but not necessarily trading in them. For now, you can go to national park and you can enjoy them, seeing them in the world. You can take photos of them. You can enjoy ecotourism. You can do adventures other than extracting, because you can imagine trading in these wild animals. First, there's limited statistics on their population in the world. We don't know how many they are, and some of them which are traded are of unknown population, or rather their population is declining. So now you can trade on something which you don't know its population until to a point where you will have nothing to trade on. And looking again at legality, which I mentioned, legal and illegal aspects are very connected. They're highly connected, because sometimes it's hard to differentiate something which is illegal and illegal when it comes to wild animals or their body parts. Because we have done some work, some investigations, and we found that even on the legal aspect, some trade is not accompanied by the permits that are needed. And again, during the trade, the key goal is to ensure that animal survives, other than driving through the journey. If you look at from how harvesting is done from the wild, how it's transported, how it is put in the holding facilities, and again taken to the airport for shipping as cargo to other destination countries, it's all cruel if you got an animal welfare view of things. For example, I can use the example of African grey parrot. As you know, it's one of the common exotic pets, and for your information, is the most traded bird species in the world. It's kept in our homes as exotic pets. But coming to think how it is captured from the wild, basically you tie one bird on a tree, Then when it screeches, it attracts other bird. Then what poachers do, they paint a tree which is near that bird with a substance like a glue. When the other birds flew there, they just get stuck. And again, extracting them will cause injuries to them. And you put them in sacks as you transport them to the holding facilities before shipping them. And again, statistics show that up to between 40 and 6% die between the capture and the destination. In simple terms, if you have 10 birds, 6 of them will die, only 4 will survive in the life in the captivity life. And again, keeping this bird in your home is also a risk to you because they are known to be reservoirs of diseases that can be transmitted to humans, especially when immune systems are compromised. So looking at those kind of aspects and argument that trade in a way helps conservation is not right because wildlife trade currently has been identified as one of the big threats to species extinction. Because as it is happening, we are extracting the few that are in the world and keeping them in our homes. We are extracting population that is able to help increase the population in the world. Even some species, if you look at tortoise, which is one of species which is commonly traded, they have a poor reproductive issues. For example, they take long to reach maturity age, and again, their reproduction numbers are quite low. So just picking one or two, basically, it means you are picking a population that could have helped to regenerate the world population. And again, if you look at trophy hunting, ideally, what is hunted, for example, there's quite a number of directions to hunt the animals which are held, for example, lions which are held. But you have to remember, some instincts have to be passed to the young population because you need to know how to live in the world. If you kill the leader in the group, what does that mean? It means the young ones will be left without having the knowledge to survive. So basically, these are some of the things that we are talking about. The data is there, the evidence is there. It's just a matter of changing our mindset and not seeing these wild animals as just mere resources, but sentient beings, as my colleague mentioned, that are able to experience both positive and negative experiences. Thank you.
You know, Dr. Yamo, as we talk about, and it's clear what you've said, the animals have freedoms.
Yeah.
We need to be conscious of how we are dealing with the animals. But also, you see, the animals are not conscious of how they're dealing with us. On a monthly basis, an annual basis, very many Kenyans are dying from snake bites.
Yeah.
We know that snake venom is important to treat snake bites.
Yeah.
Now, how do we extract this from the snakes?
Good question, Latif. First, animals react to how we interact with them. A snake will not go out of its way to bite you. You must have interfered in its ecosystem for it to bite you. Yeah?
Does that apply to all snakes?
Most of them. There's one or two. I know a black mamba can become aggressive, but you need to have been in its ecosystem, environment for it to strike. And those are some of the things we are saying. The issue has not been the animal itself. It's been us encroaching into their spaces. And that's a reality we deal with even in farming systems. Yeah. But to answer your question, there are various new techniques of generating antivenom. Yeah, you do not necessarily have to have a snake and take it through that process. Yeah, you can actually, there are synthetic antivenoms that are being developed, and the world is science has moved to a level where you don't even need the snake. You can generate using techniques in the laboratory. You can generate synthetic antivenom, which then is critical and important. But I want to go back to the snake venom itself. I think one of the things we are saying is if you're going to milk snakes, then provide for a comfortable, meet the freedoms. See, the challenge you're having in commodification is I want to get the product out of the animal, but I don't want to meet the animal's needs and requirements. And that is where that's the disconnect we're having. Because we are not meeting its requirements, then the animal reacts. Yeah. And I'll give you a simple example to show you what you're talking about. Dogs are supposed to be very good animals. They are man's best friend. But what happens when your understanding of managing a dog is locking it up during the day and not giving it space to express its natural behavior, which is a dog exercises. So at some point, the dog becomes stressed and agitated, and we've seen it mauling even the owners, children and the owner himself. So it's about, and that's why we are saying as an organization, the important thing is to cater for those fundamental freedoms or needs of the animal so that the animal is comfortable and enjoying its life for you to be able to then do what you want to do with it in a animal welfare friendly or human and sustainable way. And I think sustainability is the important thing that we need to be looking at that level.
Let's take a break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
In the Situation Room this morning is Ndu Oko, CT Muga, Eric Latif. We are hosting two gentlemen from Wild Animal Protection, Dr. Patrick Muinde, he's a research manager, and a farming campaign manager, Dr. Victor Yamo, CT.
Well, I have two questions, but let me begin with one and then go to the second one. Okay?
That would be the natural order of things.
Precisely. From one to then two. Okay?
Yes.
Dr. Yamo, when you say an environment that is appropriate for animals, let's talk about snakes. What would you say is an appropriate environment for snakes?
Well, a good question, Munga. I think
Muga.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry, Muga.
Perfectly all right. Perfectly all right.
Natural
Just
order
a
of
small
things.
N in between. A small N intruding isn't really a big issue. Yes, yes.
The N also interferes in my name occasionally. They say Yamo instead of Yamo. So we are in the same boat.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So what I would want to say is that there are people who can actually advise you, because what has been done to create this environment or conducive spaces for animals is to look at their natural behavior and their requirements. And so, for instance, if you are going to keep snakes, the requirement of the law in this country is that KWS must look at what you're going to do and then give you a permit. That permit will then have information on how do you keep snakes to ensure that they are comfortable, they have enough space depending on its length, they have enough food, they have the temperature is just right for the snake. Remember, it's a cold-blooded animal, so if you don't keep it warm, then it might end up getting into conditions that cause it to have cold. So essentially what we are saying is that for any animal that you want to keep, actually ask for technical advice, which is readily available, and you'll be sorted.
Okay, now my second question.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that what the animals have are freedoms, not rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why? I mean,
Well, it's an international way of separating rights. For humans have rights, animals have freedoms, and freedoms are basically because we are saying they have certain fundamental things that you need to provide for. Those things, in their natural setting, they would be provided for themselves. If I give you an example, chicken. In the natural setting, in the village where I come from, the chickens run around and they scratch and they find their own food. But when you start intensifying that system, it means you've now enclosed them in spaces. You need to provide for those freedoms. That's why the first one is about food and availability of food that meets their correct status. In that space that you put them, they must have adequate fresh air. It must be warm enough. It should be enough space, and that's where commodification comes in when you start packing too many of them. It's so interesting that in the developed world, Europe, for instance, the stocking density is now coming back to where Africa is. If you look at literature, Europe has even now legislated and said you cannot keep more than 30 kilograms of chickens per meter squared. And there's a math around that. It depends on how big your chicken is going to grow to. If it's a 2 kilo chicken, it means you can only keep 15 of them per meter squared. Europe had gone up to 42 kilos per meter squared, which meant you could keep 21 birds in that same space. So why is it that they are legislating that? Is because they're realizing that if you put too many of them, it becomes a good environment for passing and shifts of respiratory viruses, for that matter. And if you look at research done by International Livestock Research Institute just at the beginning of the COVID situation, where the UNEP and ILRI looked at all the zoonotic disease conditions that has happened between 1940 and 2020. And essentially they found that 50% of those conditions actually come from farming systems. And that's why we are saying we need to relook at how we are doing our farming, because we are potentially creating pandemics. As we are talking about COVID-19, for those of us who are looking at what's happening internationally, in China we're beginning to talk about a swine influenza virus that might be more pathogenic or more aggressive than what we are seeing in COVID-19. And those are the things we are saying. The way we keep animals is becoming so critical and important on our public health and zoonotic disease conditions that we need to then start addressing these things earlier before they hit us.
So we're saying that this ability to have a situation, something etched in law so that we understand how it is an environment, again, can be made conducive. That is affording them freedom.
Yeah.
But then when you legislate it, then it becomes a right, doesn't it?
And that's why as an organization we are not, we do lobby and advocacy, and we try to ensure that the right laws are in place. But our preference, if you look at what we are doing in farming system, is to work with industry to then develop industry standards, and so the industry themselves to then make certain commitments. If you've been again following what we've been doing, you find that one of the chicken producers in this country has made commitments around animal welfare. They've made commitments around food safety. They've made commitments about responsible use of antibiotics, which is another big topic in the animal welfare processes. So, yes, you're right. When you then legislate, it becomes law, and it's a right of sorts. But ideally, we prefer to call them freedoms, because it's about, we want to remind you it's about the animal and the needs of that animal being met, instead of being forced by law to do it. Okay.
Dr. Muinde, what would you want to see at the end of the day? What would be the end goal if we're trying to have these conversations being had in different quarters for the protection of the freedoms of animals? What's the end goal of all of this?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And just to pick from where my colleague left, many times people confuse between animal welfare and animal rights. And there's a big difference between the two. Animal welfare is about treating animals humanely. Yes, as humans, we can use animals, but let's use them humanly. Well, animal rights is don't use animals in any way, either for food or their products. And as World Animal Protection, we are an animal welfare organization, and basically we are creating awareness and driving policy change so that animal welfare is taken care of. As organization, we are working to deliver on two goals. One is to transform global food systems, because where we are at the moment, population is growing, and again, as you will expect, need for food is also growing. And we are seeing factory farming as the way to feed the growing population. And if you look at that, it is coming at a cost, because of some issues that my colleague mentioned about zoonotic disease aspect of it, and again, environmental contamination. Then the other aspect that we are looking at is ending exploitation of wildlife, because we are seeing wildlife as a resource that we need to benefit from. We need to sell wildlife so that we increase our revenue, which basically should not be the case. We should let these animals live in the world where they thrive and live better. Trying to, for example, if I can go further, commercialization is done by many reasons, and there are a number of drivers towards that. Like you are stuck in traffic, you see somebody selling an exotic bird, could be snake, then you see, this looks fancy. So Miss want to spend them, and you see keeping exotic pets in the way. Then on the other side, the governments are seeing it as an income generation avenue. If you combine all these, they are the key things that are driving the current commercialization of wildlife. And the key thing at the moment is try not to narrow our thinking, our mindsets, and to expand it so that we look at these other related concerns that are threatening human population and also wildlife itself. And again, ecosystem collapse is happening at a big scale, and either be it small species or be it large species, that is, I'm talking, be it be an elephant or be it a scorpion. It has a key role that it plays to maintain the current ecosystems that we have. So we are looking, our vision, we are looking to have a world where animals live free from cruelty and suffering. And we work with other entities to move the world to protect animals. Thank you.
So what, as an organization, are some of those interventions that you're directly working on right now in your current even strategic plan?
Yes, there are quite a number of them, because you can imagine when you're talking about global food systems, which basically is the whole chain from production to transportation to supplying to consumption and even to the waste management. We are looking, for example, in the factory farming or changing global food systems. We are looking at a number of aspects. For example, what is public implication of that? And in that, we are looking at pandemics. We are looking at antimicrobial resistance, which basically is how antibiotics are not becoming effective in treating infections that we used to treat before. And again, for your information, that antibiotic resistance is commonly known as a silent pandemic, because by 2050, the science shows up to 10 million people will die because of infections that will not be able to treat. So you are trying to encourage the industry to adopt higher welfare production practices, because once you take good care of animals in terms of ensuring it has a good environment where it stays, ensuring it has all the freedoms that were mentioned before, that will mean you will have reduced disease occurrence in your farms, and that means you will not require to use antibiotics. And again, because of some farming situations that we have at the moment, we find people are misusing antibiotics so that they can cover up their poor animal welfare situation in their farms. You find animals are living in filthy conditions, dirty conditions, and what does that happen? They are living in stress conditions, which reduces their immune systems and predisposes them to infection, and that will drive you to use antibiotics. And again, the other key thing that we are looking at is finance flows, like where money is going, because as you know, money is a deciding factor. And we have seen that approach because we have seen finance institutions, they just give out money and they don't know where that money is going. I use an example of battery cage system, farming systems, which is in Kenya. But you know, this system has been banned in Europe because of the suffering of chickens in those kind of systems. And they see Africa as a dumping site for that kind of systems. And what happens? I walk to any finance institutions. I tell them I want to do farming. They don't ask me where am I taking my farming. They're not interested in the nitty-gritties on that. So we are pushing for them to adopt farms guidelines, which basically contains responsible minimum standards that needs to be taken care of, just to ensure that as much as I'm funding you, you have to meet this and this standards to get my money, so that your production system really does not cause animal suffering. Then again, the other aspect that we are looking at is changing diets. For example, in Africa, we are advocating people to consume higher animal welfare products. As much as you consume meat, as much as you consume eggs, as much as you consume milk, let's try to push for it to come from high welfare farming systems in which animals are well taken care of. And again, in other nations, in other developed nations, which have a bigger or extra consumption of meat, like in developed nations, we are pushing campaigns in those areas to reduce animal sourced food protein and to shift to plant-based products, because it's only through that way we are able to prevent big threats that are facing us. For example, climate change is connected to our factory farming. Agriculture being the second biggest producer of greenhouse gas emissions after fossil fuels. So at the moment, it's the moment we need to bring this equation, how factory farming or livestock intensification is contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. So that's what we are doing for the farming work. Then for the wildlife, we are trying as much as we can to create awareness so that some of the perceived uses of wildlife, for example, use of wildlife for traditional Chinese medicine. I mentioned about hyena testicles. Like, tell me, how can that something which is basically it's sperms and connective tissues, and if you look at anatomical structure of that organ, it does not make sense how that can have any medicinal value. If you look at pangolin scales, if I can go further, or rhino horns, they are made of keratin. What is keratin? Basically, it's what is forming our nails. Where can't we? I know we cut our nails frequently. Why can't we use that as the medicinal value? So these are some of the things that we are trying to tell people. Yes, as much as we are driving this,
Hindu ideas.
there's no way keratin can treat arthritis basically, and increasingly we don't even have to go that far, because there are quite a number of unthinking ways which people consume these products, and basically we are just pushing, please, as much as you want to consume traditional Chinese medicine, can you consume the ones which don't have animal derivatives? Can you change that to plant-based derivatives? Because I understand a lot of science has been done on that. Then the other thing is about trophy hunting. We are doing a lot of work on trophy hunting because we believe it's not worth it to shoot a lion or any other wild species just for fame. Because trophy hunting, you just kill an animal to extract a body part which you are going to display in your home. Then what? You have killed an animal. Then what? So these are some of the things which we are talking about, and they have been fueled by the drive that it benefits local communities. But basically, that's not the case. If you look at the equation and how the profit is shared, the local community gets the least, while the one who is higher at the hierarchy gets all the masses. So basically, these are the kind of things that we are working on, and we are trying to push people to go for ecotourism methods that are humane, that are wildlife friendly, and to let all animals live in the world.
Dr. Yamo, at the community level, how do you interact with the people, and what is your message to everybody who's listening this morning?
I think at the community level, we have various things that we do. We have one, if I'm looking at it from a farming situation, we interact with the farmer to just raise awareness that if you take care of your animal, the productivity goes up, you get better quality products, and these are all proved by research. And so we are working with them, of course, with stakeholders and other partners in driving the message around improved productivity around some of those things. At another level, we're also working with consumers, because when you raise consumer awareness, then the consumer is able to make buying decisions that forces industry to do certain things. When I started off this job about 8 years ago, it was near impossible to talk about animal welfare in farming systems because nobody made the connection. But now we can easily make the connection for you. If you feed an animal with rotten maize, the reason why that rotten maize goes into the system is because we reject it from humans. But the reality is that the animal just concentrates what you're avoiding and puts it in milk or meat or in eggs. And that's the reality. Mycotoxins can be found, and that's driving certain things that we're looking at. If you then go injecting an animal with antimicrobials, that's what's driving antimicrobial resistance in human populations, because you're already consuming antimicrobial residues at certain levels. And I think Muinde also raised a critical thing. Sometimes when you talk about these things, people quickly shifts into plant proteins. But the reality in research we're doing, which is leading in, is that the manure that comes out of production systems, where does it go to? In the African setting, most likely use it to grow your crops.
Goes back to the farm.
So if the crop is being, if you're using that manure and the manure is contaminated with whatever you used in the poultry house or in the pig house, you're basically transferring your problem from the pigs into
From
your
the meat to the greens.
And then when it rains and there's a stream next door, all that thing is washed into the stream, so your fish is also getting contaminated. And essentially, that's why we are saying animal welfare connects. In fact, a global organization, UNEP, early this year in UNEA, looked at it and said, there is a connection between animal welfare, environmental sustainability, and public health. And they actually commissioned the Director General to work with the three other organizations, World Health Organization, or World Organization for Animal Health, and FAO, to then deliver a report next year that looks at the nexus between animal welfare and public health, animal welfare and environmental sustainability, animal welfare and planetary health. And those are the realities of what we are dealing with. Animal welfare is slightly bigger than taking care of the animal because it has implications on other levels. Then there's also implication on trade, because as I told you, when we engage with the community, or some of the things that are coming up is, where are you going to sell your products? And I think Muinde has given a good example. We have supermarkets in this country that are now saying by 2026 they will not be accepting eggs from battery cage systems. What then does that mean when we have financial institutions that are funding that kind of production system? Is it saying that we are then locking ourselves out of high-value markets? We talk about exporting, but you don't really need to export. Your biggest export market is the big international supermarket or food chain that is sitting in Nairobi. If you can't meet that standard, where else will you take our products? But I want to conclude by saying that all these things are also constitutional. And I think most of us have not read our constitutional well. Muga here might say that tulisomewa. In part of what the national government is supposed to do is actually, Bulletin 22 talks about protection of the environment and natural resources with a view of establishing a durable and sustainable system of development, including protection of animals and wildlife. So even the people who crafted our constitution realized that
they knew it.
There was going to be sustainability around production and animal protection. Thank you.
Very well put, Dr. Ari. Dr. Victor Yamo is a farming campaigns manager at Wild Animal Protection, and Dr. Patrick Muinde, the research manager at the same organization, Wild Animal Protection. We've been having a conversation about why commodification of animals is not sustainable. Now we have a better understanding of animals, animal welfare, and why animals and how we treat animals really does impact our environment and our lives. Asante sana for joining us today.
Thank you.